Welcome to Keep What You Earn, a show for entrepreneurs and business owners who want to scale and build enterprise value without making costly mistakes. I'm your host, Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CFO and CPA who left a career serving Fortune 50 companies in Wall Street to help business owners just like you make life-changing wealth with your business. These episodes are meant to be super tactical and actionable, but please remember, consult your own financial professional before you implement anything you learn in this podcast. Now, if you'd be interested in working with us to do so, check out the show notes for more information about our company, Keep What You Earn Co. All right, let's start the show. Hey, Brooks, welcome to the show.
Hi, Shannon. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I love having you here. I've had a couple of conversations with you that I've really enjoyed, and I'm looking forward to sharing those with our listeners. If you wouldn't mind, really quick, tell everybody who's listening who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name is Brooks Loughry. I've been in the aesthetic medical business for over 20 years, obviously seen a lot of changes during that time. Now I help practices that want to elevate themselves, and rather than being mired in the discount trap and the discount culture the aesthetic medical practices have found themselves in, I want to get back to where it was when I started, and that was a very elevated experience for the patient and a very elevated experience for the practitioners as well.
Yeah, and when you mentioned you've been doing this for 20 years, I immediately go to, have med spas been around for 20 years? Like, was it always, I mean, it definitely has evolved, but tell me more about what that looked like 20 years ago in terms of like who you were serving and what they were doing and their philosophy.
Yeah, 20 years ago was quite a different landscape. There were a lot fewer practices, obviously. We've seen a big boom since the pandemic in medical spas opening up. Medical spas back 20 years ago were really offshoots of plastic surgery practices, some dermatology practices. It was more a recruitment tool for some of the aesthetic procedures that plastic surgeons needed to bring patients in and catch earlier so that they weren't losing those patients to dermatologists and then kind of the emerging physicians that were exploring medical aesthetics. So it's really evolved quite a lot. Now, nurse practitioners, RNs own med spas. That wasn't the case a long time ago. And we've seen a big explosion of different specialties that are getting out of the rat race of chasing insurance and billing and coming into a cash-based practice where they can have more steady income.
Yeah. And it's kind of this mix of two worlds, right? Because you've got the medical elements of it because you are doing, clinical work. But however, you don't see the prominence of the insurance or, the systems around that. The healthcare system isn't really showing up in the med spas. I feel like it's a lot easier, more of a lower barrier to entry to start a med spa than a doctor's practice. Am I right?
Well, it's both. It's both a lower barrier of entry to get started, but it's a higher barrier of competition because now
Yeah.
you don't have insurance companies and other physicians that are referring into you. You're basically going out and finding those patients yourself. And so on the one hand, yes, it doesn't cost very much to get a space, to throw a shingle up, maybe start injecting some Botox or some fillers. That's a very low barrier of entry. The higher barrier of entry becomes where you're trying to create a luxury experience for the patient, have enough procedures and enough tools at your disposal to add a lot of value to the patients for the problems that they're coming to see you for. So yeah, it's a good mix of both. Now the insurance we may see a swing back towards insurance when you start to blend the wellness aspects of where the industry is going with the aesthetic aspects of where the industry is. And I think that, we may see that shift a little bit more in the future.
I agree. And I love what you just said about adding value to the patient because, you know, I actually saw a reel about this the other day from somebody I was following in the medical aesthetics world. And it was like nobody's really picking their Botox injector based on price. Like, I don't necessarily want to go to the cheapest, but I do want to feel like it's an experience. Like I want to feel comforted. I want to feel comfortable, enthusiastic about going, having a good experience end to end there. I don't want to, it's not like a transactional simple thing where it's just like anyone with a needle can come and inject. There's more to it than that. And I think that a lot of practices are missing the mark on when it comes to creating that experience, right?
100%. And that's the biggest thing that's kind of gotten me to where I'm on a mission now. I'm like, what do they say, the Blues Brothers? I'm on a mission from God, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm really on a mission now to evangelize, coming in and elevating the experience for the patient, adding value to the patient, because there's really not one thing that any patient can come in and just get a quick treatment and get out the door and all their problems are solved. This has to be you got to think of the patient on a lifetime journey, because as soon as they leave the practice, the aging process starts all over again. They're exposed to sun, they're exposed to chemicals in their food and in their water and things that they consume. They're breathing in air that may be, depending upon where they live, more polluted or less polluted in certain areas. So the aging process starts again as soon as they leave. So you need to think about this as a lifetime journey for the patient, not a one-time transaction, which then brings me back to that point you were making about, anybody coming in and doing it. Well, you have to have the right tools, you have to have the right knowledge base in order to serve the patients to the fullest.
Yeah. And I think with the low barrier to entry, I mean, would you agree? It also kind of breeds a lot of people who maybe shouldn't be starting these practices, or maybe people who shouldn't even say shouldn't be, but I think a lot of people are starting them as an option. Say they are working as an injector, working as an nurse practitioner, and they say, I'm going to go start my own business. I'm going to do this myself. And because they can, and although there's a lot of other, maybe you can explain a little bit about like they need medical supervision and things like that to do certain services, right? But it's pretty easy to start one. And then I feel like it can kind of dilute the quality that people come to expect, because now you've got a whole spectrum of different types of experiences. Like you might go to one med spa, have a bad experience, and then associate that with the service rather than the location.
And that's why I really am on a mission to elevate the industry. Here's the thing. If you have someone who is injecting and they've taken a couple weekend courses, they may have taken a course with a physician that's had some experience, and they have a needle in their hand, either for a tox or filler, and that's their only tool. Well, if you only have a hammer, the old saying goes, then everything looks like a nail. And so the challenge that you have is that you're not really serving the patient to the fullest if all you have is one service. And so those practitioners that think that they're going to start this on the side as a little bit of a side hustle, inject their friends and family, and then maybe grow it from there, they're really doing a disservice to the patient, because there's not a whole host of tools at their disposal that they can address the issues that are important to the patient. And then they treat it like a hobby versus a business. And that's the other challenge that I see, is that, if you're treating it like a hobby, you're going to get hobby-like results. You're not going to get a business built around your hobby. Now, the ones that take it seriously and dive in, their specialty is less important at that point, but they really have to invest in education. They really have to invest in their team. They have to invest in training, not just their clinical skills, but also their business skills. And that's kind of where I come in to help them out.
Yeah, it's like Michael Gerber says in the E-Myth too, right? It's kind of being as opposed to being the like practitioner, becoming the business owner, becoming even the manager, and then the business owner. It's really about letting yourself like out of the job description of I am an injector and into the job description of I run a practice.
Yes.
That is your job, not being an injector. So when you think about that, this is what I've told my med spas too, that as soon as you become an owner of a med spa, you are no longer a provider. I want you to disassociate with the identity of provider. You are a manager of people. Like now you are in the people business. That's what you're in. You're not in the medical aesthetics business. You're in the people business, both from the standpoint of customer service, but also in the standpoint of team management. So your entire job should be focused on people if you are running it the right way, because everybody else, you can hire the providers. It's your job to allocate the resources appropriately, hire the right providers, and make sure they're following the process. You are in the people business, or maybe even the operations business. But I think that you tell me, I think the biggest thing that pains med spas right now is the people side. I think it's finding the right help, training them, and finding that balance of what a healthy compensation looks like, because I feel like there's a lot of competition.
Well, you would know that part of it more than probably anybody, the compensation side and the finances side. That's something that I know just enough to be dangerous about.
Right.
And it would be dangerous to rely on me too much for that. But what I will say is that you're spot on with the people part. And the challenge that you have is that if you come at it as I'm an injector or I'm an aesthetic medical practitioner and I'm not a business owner, then what you do is you build yourself a high paying job, and sometimes not a high paying job. Sometimes you take a pay cut because your systems and processes aren't in place to create the business. And you end up just, working yourself into this hamster wheel of you're the only one that can produce any sales. You're the only one that can produce any revenue. And it's a dangerous place to be in. It's a very precarious place to be in. And then as we see private equity and mergers and acquisitions coming into the space, then you're not attractive to a seller. Or if you ever want to retire, you're not attractive to a seller if you're the only one who can be relied upon to generate revenue. So yeah, I think you're right on. The people, building a team, training that team, not just clinically, which, product training is readily available all over the place, but training your teams on how to communicate with patients, how to run a consult, how to take care of the intake so that you remove some of the salesiness right off the bat, so that you don't have to feel as a practitioner, or your practitioners that you hire don't have to feel like they're selling a service, they're providing a service. And but the people need to be trained in order to do that. If they're not trained properly, it's a train wreck.
Absolutely. And you touched on something earlier I want to come back to, which is discounting your way down.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a fundamental, in my opinion, fundamental difference between a mindset of maybe the business owner versus the practitioner, or even just understanding that you're leaning into, because this is a cash-based business, we're not heavily medical, insurance-based and all of that, that it can feel like, oh, I'm going to use this tactic to get more patients in. It's funny because I want to say customers, because I don't say patients. If you're discounting your services, you don't get to call your customer a patient. I think it's more about, it's towing that line between spa and medical, which are the two parts of med spa. And I want to hear your take on that, on just how people are treating that experience, and also how they're treating their pricing.
Yeah. Discounting, in my opinion, should be a 4-letter word. It should not be uttered in a medical practice. It's kind of like the example that I use is that you wouldn't go to a cardiologist that was offering 20% off of heart valve replacement surgeries this month only. You just wouldn't trust
Right.
him, first of all. Number two, you're asking the patient to self-diagnose themselves, and then you're asking them to self-prescribe their treatment. So those three things lead you away from it being anything medical. So you're right, the medical spa, I think we need to have a little bit more emphasis on medical, a little less emphasis on spa. And so I've started to refer to these practices, which is the way we used to refer to them, as medical aesthetic practices or aesthetic medical practices. Getting away from calling the providers injectors, because they do so much more. You're taking health histories. You're still providing a medical service, and so that medical part needs to be there. So discounts, 4-letter word, shouldn't be uttered. In my opinion, I know that there's some marketing people out there in the space because, again, that barrier of entry is low, and they come from other industries where discounting is norm, and that part of it leads to a degradation of the patient experience. It leads to a degradation in patient trust, and it leads to a sea of sameness that these practices have gotten themselves into, where it's just a strict race to the bottom. And so I think if we can add more value, provide the right service, communicate well with the patient, and so much of it is how you say it, not what you say. And that's what I teach and train the practices that I work with.
Very much so. I'd love your take on, I know that, like you say, discounts a 4-letter word. What about membership, recurring revenue? Because I think a lot of practices are now feeling the pressure to create a recurring revenue stream so that they don't have to hustle and sell so hard for every single patient that walks in the door, for a new patient or for repeat. Um, and if not discounts and or memberships, what do you preach that they do in order to help increase sales? Because I know that they're doing discounts in the name of bringing in new customers. And I say, well, then what if not discounts? So I'd love your
Yeah.
take on memberships, and then what if not?
It's not an easy place for them to be in, especially if the phone's not ringing. What do? You drop prices, you have a fire sale, a flash sale, you run a special. We're in October right now. So, the spooktacular specials are all over the place. The Botox and, you name it, is all over social media, which I think just, again, is a devaluing of the service. So,
Right.
I think in theory, memberships are a great idea. You get a recurring revenue stream. You have, the bank account is full on October 1st, November 1st, December 1st. I've not seen, though, a membership program that adds the right kind of value to the patient and the right kind of value to the practice. Because after all, this is a service business. You still have to perform that service. So a membership program is essentially a prepaid discount. So you go one of two ways. Either you're discounting up front and you're attracting that discount buyer, or you're communicating to them that you're like a gym and you don't want them to come in. You prefer that they you take their money and that they don't show up, which is not a great place to be either. That's the wrong kind of message to communicate. Leave that to Planet Fitness. They've already got that business model. You want to have a service-based business that's elevated. This is a very high touch, tactile business, and it should be a luxury business. These are not services that anybody really needs. Now, it can make a huge difference in people's lives, don't get me wrong. But as far as, this or, taking out a tumor, I mean, come on, those are completely different things.
Yeah.
So membership programs, again, good in theory. I haven't seen one well executed yet. I'm sure they're out there. I just don't believe in I don't believe in discounting in general, and I really don't believe in discounting medical procedures. And you still have to provide those services once they're there. So the alternative, here's the alternative.
Yeah.
Instead of selling 20 $150 membership packages, sell one $3,000 laser package. Get better at high ticket sales, get better at consultative selling. And I know that practitioners don't want to think of themselves as salespeople, but by definition, if you're taking money and ringing the cash register for a service that you're providing, you're in sales. So they kind of have to get over that part. But, get better at elevating the service levels to the patients, because, nobody is getting a life-changing transformation from a hydrofacial that's running them $99. It's not happening. But they can get a life transformation service from a laser treatment that removes their acne scars, or getting rid of their melasma that they're challenged with from their hormones from when they were pregnant. So there's a lot of things that can be done that are really life-altering that command a higher price point. And what you need to do as a practice owner is think about how you can serve those patients without discounting your brand, discounting the service, and finding the discount clients that really don't care about you anyway.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if on the membership front, I think that there can be a way they do it well, but my biggest thing is always the membership people shouldn't necessarily get a discount, but they should get additional value. Like they get additional things of value for being a member, maybe access to certain things or better availability to book, something like that. Just getting creative on like subtle benefits of being a member, but maybe not having a deep discount on it. And the other thing too is I want your take on this, because I have a kind of a school of thought on, let's say it's a laser package that lasts like 6 to 8 months, right? Because what's cool is with these practices, they have these services that technically, if you are to ensure the highest level of success, you have a multi-month commitment, because you're not going to get a life-changing transformation. Let's call it laser hair removal, even that.
Yeah.
It has to be a multi-month commitment. So as opposed to like, I'll sell one session, it's saying, okay, we're going to sell you one session maybe so you can see how your skin reacts. And then once that goes through, maybe on the second session, it's okay, great. Now you can, if you'd like to, you can prepay for your next 6, whatever that looks like. But I am a believer that I wouldn't mind offering a cash flow incentive to say, well, you can book your next 6 now, and it will be this much for a package. I wouldn't even communicate a discount necessarily, but if you want to book a la carte, it's going to be this much. That to me doesn't communicate necessarily as a client in value. If there's like a cash flow, like a prepaid versus an a la carte. What's your take on that?
No, I agree. That doesn't scream discount to me either. It screams value add, and we want you to stay in the process so that you get the best benefit.
Okay.
You get the best
so
result,
discount.
So
what reduced price can be multiple ways. Right.
Yeah, it depends on how you define it. So I think if you start with the hard line stance of discounts are a 4-letter word, okay, then you can add in nuance. For example, let's add value to the patient. So the laser example that you use, let's say it's a resurfacing laser coming out of summer right now. So there's a lot of sun damage that people are trying to reverse. Kids are back in school. You may need a laser package in order to get rid of some of the photo damage that you see, some of the sunspots, the age spots. There's nothing wrong with adding value to the patient. For example, we're going to get you into this laser treatment. However, one of the things that we are a strong believer in is this serum. That's a $300 serum. We're going to include that as a gift with purchase for you now, so that you get to pre-treat your skin. You come in for our treatments, and at the conclusion, you have something to take with you to add additional benefit to your skin afterwards. This is how you're going to get the best outcome. And for the practice to think about it in terms of, you're giving away a $300 serum, but it only costs you $150 from the company. So you're giving value that's disproportionate to what it costs the practice.
Yep.
A 15% discount, however, is a 15% discount. You're taking that right off your top line, not even your bottom line. You're taking that right off the top without adding any reason for it. There's no reason that makes logical sense on why we're giving a straight discount. But if adding value to the patient and exposing them to a recurring revenue source for the practice, so, that serum runs out and eventually they're going to need to repurchase it. Well, then that makes a lot more sense to me. It's not a straight discount. It's a gift with the purchase to expose them to other sides of the practice, to expose them to other things that are going to be giving them benefits in the long run, but also it's going to be a recurring revenue stream.
Yeah. And I think part of it too is when you communicate that benefit, because I, as a patient, as a customer, find it more valuable when someone expresses that gesture of gratitude and that gesture of kindness to me, like, oh yeah, here's a free thing to help you after or while I'm already there. If you advertise free purchase with your free serum with a purchase of,
Right.
I'm immediately like, okay, this is screaming OxyClean. Like this is screaming infomercial. Like it is all in how you say it, to your point, because I think there's a very different tone set when you tell them that's an expectation versus when you make that gesture when they don't expect it.
Yes. Thank you for saying it that way. So here's the reason behind it that I think is prevalent. And that is that, people are especially the people that start these practices typically are practitioners, either from another specialty or from another practice, or they're starting their own business, and they've seen things peripherally, or they've seen things on social media. And what they don't realize is that so much of it comes down to the implementation. How you implement it is much more important than what you see on social media. And so now you have a proliferation of poorly communicated messages that infects the whole industry, because everybody, it's like playing telephone when you're in sixth grade. The teacher starts at one corner of the room, and by the time the message gets to the other side of the room, it's completely different. Well, that's the same thing that's happening when you see people on social media and you're trying to copy what you think that they're successful at or why they're successful. By the time it gets diluted down to the 50th practice, you're trying to copycat something that's not even worth copying at that point. And so I think that proliferation of discount culture has infected the industry in such a way that that's the only thing that's communicated as a value add. And there's so much more to it than that. And as you say, it's more so how you present that, when you present that, and what you say when you do bring that up. It's not a discount. It's a gift, and it's a thank you. And it's to get you the best outcome ultimately for the treatment that we're about to provide you.
Yeah. And I think there's an over focus on the short term gain for the practice, meaning like the transactional single point transaction of, I just want to get people in the door. But it's like, what are you doing to keep them coming back? What are you doing that they will repeat visit and rebook? I think like I would rather have a solid rebooking process than a solid lead generation process. I've been emphasizing this with my practices all the time, where I go, new consults isn't necessarily the only KPI you should be measuring. You should be looking at rebooking rate. You should be looking at, their reviews. And it's more about retaining, because you have to look at the lifetime value of a customer, and people don't realize this, what the lifetime value of a customer is. Like, what's the average amount somebody spends in your practice over their lifetime, or over a course of a year or 2 years? What's the amount of money that you're expecting them to spend if they're a loyal customer? Then it's kind of, at what point, this is a really interesting metric, is at what point do they become that type of customer, that repeat customer, that like, is it when they have their second type of service with you? Now they're a lifer. Now they're only going to you. When do they trigger that loyalty? And then you have to say, okay, how do I shortcut that to happen?
Yes.
How do I get that loyalty as fast as possible?
Yeah, that's the key. You don't want to have that process take 2 years.
No.
It's too far out.
No.
That's why having an experience is so important. Every luxury brand has an experience. And again, going back to medical aesthetics is a luxury for people. So create that experience, not when they come into your practice, but before they even see you. So being thoughtful about how you message out to your community, within that 10-mile radius where you're getting the majority of your patients, how are you messaging out to them? Again, if you're starting off with discounting, then you're going to be seen as a discount chain and like everybody else. Now I'm going to see you at $10 a unit for a Botox treatment. Well, you know what? I just saw somebody in at $9. They're probably just as good. It's Botox. Well, now I've searched the internet and I found somebody for $875. Well, that's going to be less. So I don't even know how many units I need. I don't know how good my injector is, but all that's been communicated to me is price. So now I found it. I found the gold mine.
Yeah.
I found the 875, and I may not even go for the bottom. I may pick somebody in the middle, but I'll tell you what's getting ignored is the people that advertise price at a higher price point. So I don't agree with advertising price. Now I think a lot of times what we see again with that low barrier of entry is a lot of social media marketing companies coming in from other industries and communicating, we're going to get your cost of acquisition down for these customers. And we're going to drive that as low as possible, not taking into account that a low cost of acquisition doesn't necessarily lead to a long-term value for the patient. It's, over the course of the time that they're with you.
In what situation I believe it actually does? Referrals. So I think that if you refocused your marketing into, basically encouraging referrals. So especially if you have a client who's been with you for a year, maybe has multiple services, and you say, hey, we would love to offer, like, what's your take on referral bonuses or loyalty programs, if you will, where you reward the loyalty, reward the long term. Is that perceived as discounting? Because this is one of those things where I say, like, when people say here discounting, right? And you're saying it's a 4-letter word, I go, yes, but there are certain situations, like you said, where if you're adding value or you're making them feel appreciated or making them feel a certain way, there's this exchange, though, of value that you can actually take part in. What's your take on the referral system?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to go. Again, that's where the nuance comes in, but starting with that hard line, we're not a discount provider.
Right.
I think that's the reason I use that as a hard line for practices when I talk to them is to break their mind of thinking of discounting first. That's the first place a lot of places go to. So I use that as a strong way of suggesting, do not do it ever. And if you come at it with that hard line starting stance, then everything else becomes nuance. And that's one of the nuance things. So if again, it's an exchange of value at that point. It's not a discount, it's an exchange of value. So what you're doing in that circumstance for a referral is you're exchanging value for them. They're bringing you something, you're giving them something. That's an exchange of value. That's not a discount.
Yeah.
I met someone not too long ago, and we actually just did a webinar. Her name is Jeannie Buckman, and she is really, really good at the referral business. I mean, really good at it. And the way that she described it, I'm stealing this, but at least I've given her credit. So, I can't be accused, I guess, of stealing it all the way. But it's a symbiotic relationship between, think about it, two businesses. Starbucks inside of Barnes & Noble. Two disparate businesses. They don't really have a lot in common, but they each add value to one another. You've got Starbucks is going to sell more coffee by being in a Barnes & Noble because people will stay there. Barnes & Noble will sell more books because people sit down and read while they're having their coffee. So it's a good symbiotic exchange of value. And if you have a rewards program in that scenario, just like what you're saying with patients referring other patients, there's an exchange of value that adds value to both sides. And I think that's a completely reasonable way to look at things.
Yeah. And I think that, like, to go back to your point about lowering customer acquisition cost, that's a great way to do it, but also it builds essentially inherently loyal, because now you're borrowing the trust of your patient with that person. Say it's their sister, their cousin, their mom, their friend. Now you're saying, oh, I'm going to see Shannon because so-and-so recommended me. And basically that relationship is yours to lose, because now you have the inherent trust of they're walking in assuming that you are their new injector, you are their new provider. Don't F it up.
Well, think about this too, Shannon. Think about the person who's making the referral. Now they're invested in that person's outcome.
Exactly. Yeah. Their reputation.
Now they want to brag on the fact that they made the referral. And so
Yeah.
they want to make sure that you made her listen. Now, when she tells you to use that serum, you better use it twice a day, morning and afternoon. Here's how she taught me how to do it. You put it next to your sink. You put it next, whatever it is, they're going to be your salesperson to that person that they referred to, because they want that person to have a good outcome, because now it's their reputation
Yep.
online as well.
Yeah. And you know how many times I refer, like, I don't refer with the transaction in mind. Like, I refer people, I'm like, oh, you got to go see my guy who does my hair. He's amazing. And I never like text him and go, oh, by the way, I told someone about you. Right.
Right.
I just trust that they're going to go. But here's the thing. You're missing such an opportunity as a practice owner if you're not asking every new customer, how did you hear about us?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. How did you hear about us? It's a simple question. And people are with pride will say, oh my God, Susie told me about you. And it's like,
Yes.
great. We're going to definitely say thank you to her, or we're going to say thank you to whoever referred you, who referred you. And then now you feel like, oh, of course I'm going to tell you that because I want to make sure they get a reward for it. Uh, that's huge. And then, but here's the other thing too. That's a metric you can track, is how many referrals came in and said that person's name, because now you know who your advocates are, who your ambassadors are out in the world. A, you can reward them, but B, you know who's not. And you might have repeat customers who are maybe have never given a referral before. That's an opportunity to say, hey, we would love referrals. Or even, I mean, not to get confrontational, but you can also say, like, any reason we haven't, maybe you haven't referred, finding a way to say that, but finding a way to also investigate, what can we do better that would trigger referrals from this person?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's referrals are the most powerful tool at our disposal.
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to giving that experiential, elevated, service to the patient.
Yep.
From the time they come in, from the time they first walk through the door, what does your lobby communicate? What does your front desk communicate? What do your treatment rooms communicate? What do the things that you that are around you communicate without words? But what do they communicate to the people that are walking into your practice? And we already know that there's going to be certain barriers. We already know that there's going to be certain things that are working in our favor, like referrals. And so part of the intake process that I try to implement with my practices is that let's get those started right away. So we already know, let's remove some friction. We already know that we were going to want to ask for a referral. So let's start by asking, how did you get referred to us? Like what you're saying is, where did you come from? But let's start that on the intake form. Let's remove barriers, or let's expose the patients to more things in the practice before they even talk to a practitioner, before they even have their consultation. Let's start to get in that mindset of, here's everything that we offer. Here's the things that we'll be talking about. What are the things that are important to you that we can deliver that maybe you weren't thinking about when you booked this appointment? And then little things, going back to, it's a high touch, high service business. Well, how often do you get a personalized video from someone that you saw that day? You mentioned your hairdresser. Has your hairdresser ever sent you a personalized video on your, to your phone via text message or through your email? Hey, Shannon, thanks for coming in today. It was super good to see you. I can't wait to see you in 4 weeks when we book your next appointment. I've already got you down here for, that Thursday at 2 p.m. Looking forward to seeing you then. Those things can help rebook rates, which is, I think, one of the other things that you mentioned. You should rebook, in my opinion. All these services are ongoing. You should rebook like your dentist. Your dentist does it so good that Amazon has a 3-year calendar for your dental appointments that you can purchase. So you need to get as good at rebooking appointments as your dentist is at rebooking theirs.
Yeah. And it has to become an inherent rebooking. Like, you come in and then you don't leave until you rebook the next one. And it's not even a choice. I think I've gone through a couple of med spas where they're like, would you like to rebook your next one? The simple language change from would you like to rebook the next one to, hey, let's get you rebooked. Daniela said she needs to see you in 6 weeks. How's the week of the 13th look? Like,
how about this, Shannon? Take it one step further.
Yeah.
How's the week of the 13th look? It looks like Tuesdays are good for you because that's when you came in to see us today.
Exactly.
Is 10 a.m. still a good time for you that day?
Yep.
Get down to the ridiculous. So one of the things that I try to teach practices is just take away all the barriers. Your job is to remove friction. Just make it easy. Don't give the patient homework. So on your website, don't give them homework saying you have all these different services, Halo, BBL, I've got Morpheus 8. They don't know. They don't spend all day on that. So take away those barriers, talk about their conditions that you're treating. And then when they're leaving, hey, seems like Tuesdays are good for you because that's when you saw us today. How is Tuesday, the week of the 13th at 10 a.m.? Does that still work for you? And let's get it on the books now. We'll send you a reminder, follow up with an action list of things that the patient can do before their treatment. And hey, a personalized video never hurts because again, they're seeing you, they're hearing you, and it's an elevated touch point that shows them that you care. And it doesn't take that much time. It takes 30 seconds to send a video.
No, and I really, really want to put this out that it doesn't take that much time or money. Like,
Or
that's
money.
not an expensive thing to implement. Like, people are spending out the wazoo on ads and claiming marketing's expensive and all these other things. And I go, it can be so simple if you just go back to the basics.
Mhm.
Even if you sent out a card, hey, your birthday's coming up. Hey, it's been a minute since we saw you, it like just the fact that, just to your point with the video, as a patient, as a customer, I go, oh, they're watching, like they're paying attention.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like, I don't want to disappoint them. They're like looking forward to my appointment on Thursday. If I move or cancel it, oh, like I'm really disappointing Jose. So I feel invested in, oh, I better follow through on this. My friend is expecting me. And that's how like that kind of psychologically what happens. And the last thing I want to hit on too is, speaking of that, I think that there's a symptom in the industry right now when it comes to the impact of cancels and no-shows, number one. And I do think there is something that, like, when you do everything we've talked about so far, when you build that customer loyalty, when you have that experience, I believe naturally that will go down. But I think a lot of people are treating things acutely and essentially punishing the cancel no-show, or just trying to like deal with the cancel no-show as opposed to avoiding and preventing. What's your take on it?
As with everything, I think if
Mhm.
you already know the problem.
Yeah.
So if you already know the problem, why keep stepping in the same pile of problem? Avoid the problem. So if you know that the no-shows have been a challenge for you historically, then how are we going to remove that as a barrier? How are we going to remove that friction? So again, the experience doesn't start when the patient walks into that appointment. Okay, the experience starts when they've made that first phone call, or even before. But let's say just from your first contact point. How do you talk to the patient? Are you rushed? Do you take your time with the patient on the phone? Have you considered removing the phones from the front desk and putting them in the back of the practice where it's quiet and patients get the attention that they need, versus at the front desk where that person is juggling 15 other things and trying to check people in, check people out, answer the phone, and they're just scattered with everything going on. Hey, can I put you on a quick hold? Okay, well, as soon as you do that, your experience has gone from a 10 to a 6. And now you got to battle back up to get it to an 8. And so you already know the problem. People are going to cancel. How do you stop that from happening? So personalized video, you're going to get their contact information already anyway, because you have to have that for them to book the appointment. A personalized video can start that. A text message not saying, hey, don't forget, because, all right, well, you're just nagging me like everybody else nags me. I've got enough people pulling at my shirt tails. I don't need one more person pulling at my shirt tails. But how about this? Hey, we're really excited to see you. You're coming in for this treatment. What we've seen other people do that have come in for this treatment that's been very successful is to prep yourself by doing this, and this. And that kind of puts in their mind that you're already looking out for them. You haven't even come in to see me, but we're looking out for you. We want you to get the best experience. We want you to get the best outcome. And that trust is earned before they even step foot into the practice.
Absolutely. And I think the prevention of the cancel no show, I mean, you can't prevent emergencies from happening. Patients have to cancel, things like that. But I do think that there is a way to handle it, and a way to prevent in the way of controlling the volume of it, as opposed to dealing with it on the back end when they happen. There's a way to make sure that those don't happen, or at least your policy is communicated where if you no show, we're charging you, we're swiping your card. Like, we're taking a card in advance and we're going to swipe your card for whatever we have to cover that if it's within a certain range. I mean, hotels do it. Gyms do it. Like, I would go to a spin class and I knew if I canceled within like 8 hours of that class starting and that bike was empty, they were going to swipe my card.
Right.
And I was okay with that because I was like, well, yeah, that's a dick move. If I do that, you're a business. Like, I know that's what's going to happen. So, but it's also a way to deter that behavior from happening and get people to commit to coming in, and that they will prioritize the appointment if they know there's also consequences to not coming. There is a bit of like that stick and the carrot, but I think that both can work.
So here's what I see a lot.
Yeah.
And I have a little bit of a different philosophy. More aligned with what you're saying is more my philosophy. So what I see oftentimes is that practices will charge upfront for a consultation. Well, we don't really know what the patient needs yet. And so that feels kind of gross to me. I don't really
Yeah.
know you. I don't know what you need. I'm here to evaluate you and I'm going to charge you up front, but we'll apply that to your service later. Well, that assumes that I'm going to go ahead and have a service.
Yeah.
You
You're
haven't shown
basically
me any
roping into
value
me
yet.
buying something because I have like an entry fee to walk in your door.
Right.
I
Right.
don't like a cover charge.
It's not quarter beer night.
No, it's a cover charge that then goes toward paying for food, and it's like,
Right.
okay, but that means I have to buy something. Yeah, I agree with you on that.
But
I think
I'm 100%
consults
on board.
have to be free. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm 100% on board with, hey, our time is also valuable. So we
Mhm.
will take a credit card. You don't show it is a $150 charge, just so
Right.
you're aware. We run that the same day. So don't be surprised if you see a charge on your card. We'll send you plenty of reminders. We'll want you to have a great experience. But again, it's how, like, as with all of this, it's how you present it, not what you're presenting so much.
Mhm.
And so again, that comes down to training. That comes
Yeah.
down to a business philosophy. That comes down to all the things that I can help them with on the inside of the four walls of the practice to make sure that their teams are executing, because poor execution, you might as well, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So you might as well have
Right.
that gun aimed right at your toe, because that's what you're doing. You're shooting yourself at the foot if you don't have proper execution. But so many times I see practices invest in clinical training and not,
Mhm.
what I would call sales training, or at least consultative selling training. And that's where I think that a lot of practices are missing the mark. And then going with that copycat discount culture, they're already
Mhm.
attracting the wrong people, and now they're copying things that aren't working in other practices. So you're compounding a problem that other people have already found for their own
Mhm.
practices. And so
Yeah.
now you're just creating it for yourself.
Yeah, and like I said, sometimes it's not avoidable, but there's another thing that I recommended too. Like, remember how you said that go taking it one step further and suggesting an appointment time based on like, well, it's a Tuesday that you usually come in Tuesdays at 10. So do you want me just to put a Tuesday at 10 on the calendar? Number one, that's like attention to detail. And I'm like, I love that you noticed that and you already know my schedule. Number two is another thing you can do is, for example, if you have a cancel or a no show, and then you can say, who's on my list on Tuesdays? Like today's a Tuesday, who usually comes on Tuesday or who's coming next Tuesday for a facial or for something? And you go, any chance you're free and want to come now? We just had an opening. That can't hurt either. To have kind of a little bit of a phone tree of maybe some regulars and some customers who have a pattern of coming in on that day of the week or are doing a service that can easily be moved and doesn't depend on a certain time frame in between. Because I think that could be an opportunity too if like you want to be on the call list, if we get Tuesdays open up, if we have an appointment canceled, do you want to be on a short list to call to come in? There might be somebody who wants to do that. That would be cool, especially to recover the revenue. But implementing something like that can be complicated. So,
It doesn't have to be.
yeah.
It does take organization, which,
Yes.
it requires a little forethought.
Systems. Yeah.
Systems, yes. Here's another angle to that, though, is because those are your loyal customers. When you implement new technology or you go to a new training, those are the loudmouths, because they come to see you all the time. You've already know that they've made referrals. They're the ones you say, hey, look, we're implementing a new technology. We're going to have a trainer from the company join us that day. We would love it if you came in, complimentary treatment, so that we can learn, but also so that you can spread the word amongst your circle of influence. And I think that's, creating those systems and
Huge.
it allows you to filter through who is going to be beneficial to the practice. And again, it's not a discount. You're getting something of value from them. It's a before and after photo. Maybe it's them talking about their experience. You start to learn what things they gravitate towards, and you can utilize that as a fair trade.
Yeah. I think that all goes back to kind of a underlying theme of this conversation, which has been like offering value for value, but not in the form of an inherent discount they haven't earned or devaluing your service or following just the tactics without the substance behind it, right? Why are you offering a discount? Like a lot of it is, it's going to sound funny, but a lot of it's cosmetic, which is an ironic term, but it's purely a cosmetic or topical treatment, if you will, for your pricing problem. Is you're actually just applying all of these tactics that you hear from, who knows, coaches, experts, gurus, whatever. You hear it on the internet through this telephone game and say, oh, I'm going to go try doing that, without understanding what is causing the issue that this is supposed to solve, without actually going through the diagnosis of finding a real treatment for it. You're applying proactive, right? Or going to like applying the pharmacy cream and saying, I'll just buy God knows what sunscreen. You're not really like figuring out, well, what is causing this and how do I treat it? And that is such the irony of this industry for me, is how many topical treatments my medical aesthetic practices are applying. And when I actually phrase it that way, where I go, well, how much does it piss you off when your clients come in and say, I use St. Ives? That's my skincare routine. And they're like, no. And I go, that's what happens when you tell me you discount. Like you're just using whatever gets the best advertising online.
There's definitely the irony is there, of course. And they're the parallel of people that are skilled in diagnosing medical problems aren't skilled in diagnosing their business problems and the communication problems. And that's where humbly, I would suggest that you need some help.
Yeah.
And I know a guy.
Yeah, I know a guy too. Brooks, tell me more about how you help these practice owners and where people can find out more about you and your business.
Yeah. Best way to find me, I'm pretty simple. LinkedIn by my name, Brooks Loughry. It's Loughry. Instagram at Brooks_advises. You can always find my website. It's biosynergialabs.com. You can shoot me an email at brooks@biosynergialabs.com. And I'm sure that this will all be posted so that they can click through and not have to memorize all those long words.
Nope, they will not have to type that. Guys, it's all in the show notes. Scroll down on your podcast app and you can see all the information on how to get in touch with Brooks. Brooks, thank you so much for jumping on today. Really appreciate it.
Shannon, it was a real pleasure to talk to you. I appreciate it. And hopefully your audience got something out of this.
They definitely will. As you think about growing and scaling your business, it's important to focus on how your operating costs align with your profit and personal goals. Are you allocating your resources wisely? Are your expenses supporting growth or are they holding you back? Building a sustainable and profitable business takes intentional budgeting and regular assessments of where your money's actually going. Now, with a power session, you can get personalized strategies to help your businesses thrive. Check out the show notes for more information on power sessions and how we can work with you to create the profit plan your business needs for a successful 2025.